but it's why you can see these amazing speeds of processing. When you speak, do you think about each word? Do you formulate each word in advance of it coming out of your mouth? It happens so fast that if you had to actually think about the words, you'd be like someone trying to speak a foreign language for the first time. You'd be like translating in your head, and it would slow down, and you wouldn't be able to communicate. You'd be autistic. If you had to think about the words, you'd be acting like you're autistic. You'd essentially be unable to communicate effectively. So, given that, what's the research in this area? So scientists are starting to look at something called ephaptic connections. So this is when very proximate electrical discharges start to entrain themselves and act together. Okay, they start to do the same thing. So it used to be thought of in neurosciences that that was the cause of epilepsy. So only when cells kind of all got together and entrained, and you see the spike, 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 spike on the EEG, well, that's epilepsy. Turns out that these very small electrical fields are very potent at creating that sort of imagery and electrical connection and messaging to other parts of the brain. And they all do it through these little tiny connections like miniature cell phone towers. So this one says neurobiologists find that weak electrical fields in the brain help neuronal firing, but it's only weak by our definition, thinking about wiring in our house. But from the brain's perspective, it's extremely powerful. So I'm going to strike the weak. It's actually very powerful. We used to think about this. We used to think that neurons work through a domino effect. So one nerve fires, another nerve fires, another nerve fires, and it kind of goes down the line like dominoes. And if you do the calculations, you would never talk, you'd never walk, you'd never think, you'd never have memory if that was actually how it worked. So we got to get rid of that. That doesn't work. So here's the new, this is from Nature Neuroscience, ephaptic coupling of cortical neurons, and it's actually the way that most of your major communication in the brain takes place. So think of your cell phone and your cell phone tower, how fast that happens, and that's why you have so much bandwidth in your brain to be able to make this happen so quickly. Field effects in the CNS play functional roles, so this is again those ephaptic connections, but it's also why some people might be really sensitive to EMF, electromagnetic field effects. So do any of you think you're actually sensitive to electrical fields? So some of you actually, you're aware of it, and you can sense that you don't do well. So I had a patient one time that had one of those new high-powered Wi-Fis in their house, and the child's bedroom was here, and the bed was up against the wall, and on the other side of the wall was the kitchen, and not the kitchen, the washroom. And in the washroom was the electrical panel where all the stuff came into the house, including the Wi-Fi area. So the Wi-Fi emitter went right next to the bed on the other side of the wall. Didn't think about it at all. There was no consideration for it whatsoever. The child crashed, did really poorly. We had a hard time figuring out, like, what's different? What's different? Nothing different, nothing different, nothing different. Like, did anything change with electrical within the house? Did you do something different? Yeah, we just got a new Wi-Fi. Where'd you put the Wi-Fi? It's right on the other side of the wall from his bed. Why don't we move that or just try turning it off for a while and see what happens? Suddenly the child started to come back. So is that believable? Are these field effects that potentially vulnerable? And the answer is apparently yes. So when we look at efficient communication, harmonic connections are happening within the brain. And you don't have to take pictures, by the way. All this is on the web. There's no magic here. You can have it all, okay? It's there. So better quality probably even than that. In autism, however, it's asynchronous and it's not really connecting. So we synchronize it, we connect it through the magnet, getting to the right sort of electrical harmonic that we want. And here's our trial week. So in order to help parents, we felt that we needed to have a way to help you to predict whether or not this was going to be something meaningful for you. So we do a trial week. It's not actually a week. We like to get you into the office on a Wednesday. We do the EEG. We quantify the physics of the brain. We set up our protocols, and Monday you start treatment. Treatment is for 30 minutes. You're gonna basically treat 6 seconds out of every minute for 30 minutes for 4 days. You're gonna come back on the Friday, you're gonna have another EEG, and we're gonna look at the interval change between those two to try and decide, are you a real candidate for this? So this is a child with autism who comes in looking absolutely typical. The entire front half of the brain in the harmonic that we're looking at is completely disconnected. It's black, it's dark. There's no harmonic exchange there at the frequencies that we're evaluating. So and that's frontal lobe activity, impulse regulation, language, auditory processing, higher cognitive functions, and those kinds of things. What's working is the visual cortex. How many of you have visually dominated kids? The reason they're visually dominated and want to live in an iPad is because that's the part of the brain that's really functioning for them. If they could crawl in that little iPad and be part of that two-dimensional world, they would do it. I'm convinced. So this is after 4 1.5-hour sessions of MRT. Do you see the difference? It's so much better connected. So this is a child who's an ideal responder. 4 treatments has already resulted in both a clinical and an electrographic change for this kid. So this is a big woohoo. You know, we got the football went through the uprights, we scored. This is exactly what the parents and we want to see. It's not always that beautiful, by the way, but this is ideal. This is what we're looking for. So this is a 14-year-old boy with autism and epilepsy. And we analyzed this in a different way, trying to look at where the source generator of the epilepsy might be. Do you see anything that looks a little bit unusual there? The right temporal lobe, which is the most frequent location for autism-related epilepsy, is hot. It has a focus in it that's the center of all of his epilepsy. We can find it and localize it, and we can even localize it in 3-dimensional space, and this is a 3-dimensional localization of his epilepsy. So we know exactly where it's coming from. That allows us to create a unique magnetic protocol for that brain. How many of you want every brain to be treated exactly the same? Do you know who does? The FDA. You know why? They've approved the treatment with magnetic stimulation for depression, and everybody gets exactly the same treatment. Really? Does that seem like humanity to you? That is a crazy process. So we individualize it to each particular brain. So here's a 7-year-old boy, and I love this particular one. You see all the wavy lines? There's a lot of synchronous activity in this brain. There's a lot of synchronous activity. There's 3 separate synchronous harmonics happening simultaneously. So how would you like to listen to 3 television shows at the same time of equal volume? Could you figure out what's going on? Could you process that? Would you be able to get into the story? Could you answer questions about what's happening? So this is a very disruptive processing. But you know what? You'd be surprised how much the human brain is capable of. You know, these kids are getting it. They're not giving it back to you. But a lot of stuff that you don't even think is getting in is actually getting in, and it's not lost in the noise. It just can't be retrieved from the noise when you want it to be retrieved. It's there. Huge amounts of data processing. This is a very hot brain. This brain is way overworking and processing way more than it should, but not efficiently. So what do you think our treatment plan would be? Let's get rid of the other 2 bundles of activity, and let's focus on just one. Let's turn off those other 2 TV sets. Let's just find one TV set that we can listen to and learn and focus from. Get that noise out of their head. So this is after 10 treatments. We've got it down to 2 after 10 treatments. Do you see those 2 big peaks? We don't have 3 anymore. We have 2 big peaks. We're a lot better off. We got a lot more efficient processing. We're starting to see changes. Good things are happening, but we're a long ways from done after 10 treatments. We've got a lot more work cut out for us with this kid. This happens to be someone who just graduated from the Diamond School in Florida, who was 18 at the time that we did this, who's now 21. This was his original EEG. We saw this, and Dr. Jen, who just kind of glanced at it, said, wow, what a brilliant individual, because he's so synchronous. I said, dude, that's my son. He said, oh, sorry. And he looked at it a little more carefully. He said, oh, I see the problem. What's the problem? He's really beautifully, very focused and synchronous, but at about 4 cycles per second instead of 8 to 12. So he's processing great, but slow. Now, he's had MRT and a lot of other interventions since then, and guess what? He's processing a whole lot better, enough that he can sit at the bar, order his own beer, unfortunately, he likes beer, and flirt with the bartender. So, and he loves girls. So he's all about that. So he's become quite a social, integrated, connected person, doing a tremendous amount of things, very witty. I mean, like, this kid gets stuff and has insight and makes you just laugh. Like, how did you get that? You know, he's that synchronous. Bitemporal lobe dysfunction. Both of these temporal lobes are very slow. This is a very common picture in autism. Having both temporal lobes slow down is not at all unusual in autism. That's why some people advocate the use of SSRI drugs. Now, I don't like those kinds of medications. I think it's, you know, highway to the danger zone again, where you're actually committing to some real challenges. But if you do SSRI drugs, we can oftentimes get the dose down to something very small with MRT. But this is a real common dysfunction in autism, and it's causing us to change some of our modalities so we treat the brain a little bit differently. So this is not a child with autism. This is a very bright kid who's at a high-tech institution, Georgia Tech, but struggling. Very bright kid. He is the brother of a kid with severe autism and epilepsy. And do you see anything about that brain that looks a little suspicious to you? You guys are experts now. You're going to start doing the physics assessment for us here pretty soon. There's a smaller peak, but there's another synchronous slow wave, isn't there? And it's occurring in the frontal area of the brain, particularly in the anterior cingulate, which is an area of the brain that we know is associated with dysfunction like ADHD. So he has a hard time regulating his attention and focus despite being very bright. He's very synchronous. We're going to tune all that up for him, and with a matter of probably 1 or 2 weeks, this young man is going to be doing much better without having to go on ADHD medications. So this is one of you all. This is a mom. This looks like you came back from Iraq after your buddies got blown up in a roadside bomb. It's that bad looking. It really is. It's blurry and slurry, and it's slow, and there's central dysfunction within the sensory motor cortex, and God bless you, girls. I mean, really, this needs treatment. So what we found when we treat the mothers of kids with autism, what do you think happens to the kid? They get better. They do. I'm not saying y'all are crazy. I'm saying you're beat down, okay? You're beat up. Whichever direction you feel like you are, down or up, whatever it is, you've been beaten on by this whole process, and God bless you. But if you can get a little bit of treatment for yourselves, I know it's all about the kid, and all of your resources, time, effort, and thoughts go that direction. But if you can get something for yourself, you'll be able to help your kid a whole lot better. And it doesn't take 6 months of treatment most often. Now, this looks really challenging, but I guarantee you this is going to come around really quickly with a little bit of treatment, not a lot of treatment. By the way, this lady runs her own business. She's very successful. She has several kids. She has a husband who hasn't left her. God bless her for that. God bless him for that. So this is still a success story, but it's a real challenge for her. So I was fortunate enough to be the principal investigator on the MRT study in autism. This is all the brainchild of Dr. Jin. His sister was the study coordinator. We had 2 independent individuals assessing the kids apart from the people in the office. So we had a lot of independent assessment of what was going on. The final outcome measurement from the study was the CARS test. We did